Let's take stock of the process so far. You have developed proficiency language, looked at pilot tests, learned how to take proficiency language to write rubrics for assessments, and now you are ready to field test. A field test is a full application of the language in the field, while a pilot test was for a short period of time and asked teachers to give feedback on smaller portions of the proficiency language. A field test in proficiency development will require teachers to create assessment rubrics and apply those to performance assessments with multiple examples of student work over time. The initial design can also be the prototype to help you build your assessment map later on, since you will want to track which proficiency language is used for which subjects and grade levels. More thorough field tests will also track where students scored. If you think ahead as much as possible to design your field test, you may be able to avoid duplication of work later on. Just like in the pilot test, you will want to identify the who, how, and what. Let's start with the what first. Because performance assessment is such an integral part of proficiency-based assessment systems, it's important to include them in these field tests. Knowing that the first set of proficiency language you create will not be your last iteration, you can select teachers who are actively using performance assessments in their classrooms. It will be difficult, if not impossible, to assess students on proficiencies and transferable skills using multiple choice tests, pick and place, or other traditional assessments. If you already have a capstone, gateway project, or student-led conference in place, think of ways to incorporate those into your field test. It's not necessary to include all teachers in the field test, but the more data you collect, if collected in a meaningful way, the better your full implementation will be. And just like in the pilot test, you'll want to look at data from multiple disciplines and levels. Now let's address the how. How long will your field tests last, and how will you collect feedback? In the text-based reflection, there is a Google form that can help you think about how to collect data. While you should design a data collection method that fits your context, this example is meant to provide you with a jumping-off point for your first field test design. Field tests should also take a longer amount of time than a pilot test. Depending on when you finish developing your language in relation to the start of the next school year, you might take 2 months, 4, or even 10 months to field test. It's always best to start full implementation at the start of a school year. In the pilot test, it's possible to look at proficiencies one at a time as you develop them, because you are honing in on specific language. In a field test for a proficiency-based assessment system, you'll want to test multiple content and transferable skills proficiencies at once to see how they work together, so that you can begin to get feedback on the bigger system. Some systems will decide to develop and implement one type of proficiency first, either content or transferable skill, as a way to engage in thoughtful, manageable development. This is a good strategy. But when the second type of proficiency is developed, it's important to look at how they work in tandem, so that the second field test should include both content and transferable skill proficiencies. Let's consider an example. Communication is a transferable skill, and it is also embedded into standards language, which is the basis for content proficiencies. Will your transferable skill language support content proficiencies, or will it be confusing? Even if you were thoughtful in choosing the language, you will need to actually test in the field with rubrics and performance assessments to see in application how both sets complement each other. Now we think about who should be involved. Just like in the pilot test, multiple teachers from different levels and disciplines should be engaged in the field test. Students should also be active participants, and you might consider how to include parents as well. If you have community members participate in the scoring of student performance in a senior project, for example, you could also include them in your field test. Some schools will choose to not do a field test. If they complete their proficiency language at the end of June, for example, they might make the decision to dive right in. While this method will eventually work in the end, if you have the space and time, field testing will help you iron out some wrinkles and start a richer dialogue about proficiency-based assessment before full implementation. Thank you for watching. Be sure to record your work on the activities and reflections for this question in the Evidence of Learning tool. If you have any questions or want to share a resource that addresses this particular question, please contact us at the Center for Collaborative Education at vtclg@ccebos.org.